Welcome to St. Joseph's Villa. The Villa is one of Virginia's largest nonprofit, non-sectarian organizations for children, with an annual operating budget of more than $13 million. More than 300 employees provide educational, residential, and day services to more than 600 children and families each day. In 2009, St. Joseph's Villa will celebrate its 175th anniversary. During those years, the Villa has undergone many changes. However, one thing has remained constant: our desire to provide care and education that helps everyone be the best person they can be. In many cases, that means trying to help people society has abandoned. Our motto is that we never stop believing in children and their families, and we mean it. Our story is an interesting one. In 1834, a priest, Father Timothy O'Brien, came to Richmond to found the city's first Roman Catholic church, St. Peter's. He noticed that there were several orphans in downtown Richmond, so he asked the Sisters of Charity, a community of religious women located in Emmitsburg, Maryland, to send 3 sisters who could start an orphanage and school for the children. The sisters arrived in November of 1834 and founded St. Joseph's Academy and Orphan Asylum. The original orphanage was only for girls, and the building was at 4th and Marshall Streets in downtown Richmond. The school served not only the orphans but also girls from Richmond's most prestigious families. During the Civil War, daughters of Southern officers stayed at St. Joseph's. The sisters also started the first wartime hospital in Richmond and eventually ran 3 hospitals during the war. And even though the hospitals were located in Richmond, the daughters cared for Northern soldiers as well. St. Joseph's was incorporated in 1868. In 1885, Daniel Hopkins Gregg, a former Union doctor, died and left St. Joseph's approximately $100,000, a huge gift in those days. Shortly thereafter, in 1898, the sisters used the gift to purchase Hollybrook Farm, a 245-acre farm located on the Washington Highway, approximately 3 miles north of Richmond. Hollybrook was a working farm, and produce grown at the farm was carried into Richmond by the Ashland-Richmond trolley. You can still see the gully where the tracks were, and the bridge over the tracks just behind the villa. During the summer, the sisters and orphans would live at Hollybrook to escape the hot summer heat in downtown Richmond and to enjoy the healthy country air. The orphans also helped with farm chores. St. Joseph's received a truly transformative gift in 1922 with the death of Major James H. Dooley, a longtime St. Joseph's trustee. Major Dooley and his wife lived at Maymont, which they left to the city of Richmond and is now a city park. Major Dooley left $3 million to St. Joseph's and asked that the Daughters of Charity build a new orphanage right next to Maymont. The sisters thought the new orphanage would quickly become surrounded by the growing city, and after several years of presenting their case in courts, the Daughters of Charity were given permission to build the new orphanage on the Hollybrook Farm property. The plan for the orphanage was unlike any other. If you have seen the movie Annie or the movie Cider House Rules, you have an idea of what many orphanages were like: large buildings where children were warehoused until they grew old enough to leave. In contrast, the new orphanage was based on a cottage plan which included plenty of open spaces. 8 cottages, or residences, surrounded 4 central buildings: the chapel, the school, the gymnasium, and the administration building. The residential buildings were known as cottages because they were so much like someone's home. Each cottage was beautifully decorated, and all of the cottages had dogs and other pets too. A cottage sister lived with the girls, and as much as possible, the sisters created an atmosphere where girls at St. Joseph's Villa had all of the comforts of home that other girls in the community had. The new St. Joseph's opened in 1931, and the name of the organization was changed to St. Joseph's Villa to reflect the modern, state-of-the-art design for residential care facilities. More than 150 girls could live at St. Joseph's Villa, and not all of them were orphans or even Catholic. St. Joseph's Villa took girls who came from families facing hard economic times during the Depression and during World War II. Once the family got back on its feet, the girls would return home. Years later, the villa would provide emergency shelter for children fleeing from other conflicts. Castro's revolution in Cuba, and wars in Vietnam and Cambodia. St. Joseph's Villa touched many lives in the community through its school. It was a parochial school providing children with academic and religious education. It's not completely clear when St. Joseph's Villa began accepting boys. It may have been in the mid-1940s, and the first boys were probably brothers of girls who were already at the villa. By the 1960s, there were quite a few boys. The Daughters of Charity opened Seton House, a home for unwed mothers, during the 1960s. The property is just south of the villa and now houses the villa's day support services. By the 1970s, the growing acceptance of birth control and society's preference for foster care over group care and institutionalization led to a gradual, steady decline in the numbers of children needing placement. By the mid-1970s, the number of children at the villa had dropped to below 50. As the number of orphans dropped, St. Joseph's Villa adapted and responded to the community's needs by developing programs to help children with learning disabilities and later behavioral issues. These other programs grew, and the unmet needs of children and youth changed from the villa's original purpose. The Daughters of Charity considered their situation and resources, and in 1977 made the difficult decision to withdraw from the villa and to entrust its mission to the lay leaders. The sisters turned the grounds and the buildings over to the villa's trustees and returned to Emmitsburg. It is hard for us today to appreciate the situation the trustees faced in the summer of 1977. For more than 140 years, the villa had operated as a Catholic orphanage and school. Now what? First, the trustees knew that the villa's mission was to serve people in need, and so they started adding diverse services to address those needs. The villa's educational programs were expanded and enhanced, and the villa started new services such as a weekend respite center for children with severe developmental disabilities and various residential housing programs for children in crisis. In 1982, the trustees opened the Hollybrook apartment complex next to the villa. Hollybrook is one of 3 HUD housing facilities in the United States specifically designed for people living with disabilities. Community programs such as a senior center and a conference center were started to serve the Richmond area. Working with Lawrence Lewis and his family, the villa started the Flagler Home, a transitional housing program for homeless mothers and their children, and many community children also learned to swim in the villa's pool. The villa trustees also made some difficult economic decisions. In 1986, they sold a major part of the farm to a developer who created Villa Park Drive and the business park behind the villa. In the 1990s, the villa's board of trustees rededicated itself to addressing the needs of children. Over the next several years, programs not specifically serving children's needs were phased out as new programs emerged. In 2003, this direction resulted in the adoption of the villa's motto, "We never stop believing in children and their families." Today, St. Joseph's Villa provides educational, residential, and day services to children with special needs and their families. We help some of our community's most challenged populations: children with autism and other severe developmental disabilities, families who are homeless, at-risk youth, and youth suffering from abuse and neglect. For almost 175 years, St. Joseph's Villa has provided care and education for children and families who had little hope about their future. We are proud to say that we never stopped believing in them, and we will continue to believe in them and the lives we can help them build. It has been and will continue to be the St. Joseph's Villa mission.